West Side Story is known today as the modern Romeo and Juliet. This 1960 film was directed by Jerome, Robbins, and Robert Wise. The story is set on the west side of New York City in the 1950s and tells a story of two gangs, the Jets, who were predominantly white men, and the Sharks, who were Puerto Rican immigrants. The Jets and Sharks both attend a dance. A forbidden love is formed between a former Jet, Tony, and the leader of the Sharks' little sister, Maria. The two gangs were outraged at the affection shared between the lovers, and as a result, the feud between the two groups only grew. The forbidden love between Tony and Maria was the final straw and caused the gangs to result to settling the debacle with a final rumble. After a series of tragic events, lies, and distortion, the love between two people and the feud between the two gangs officially ends. This rendition of Romeo and Juliet, aside from others, was that the original story told by Shakespeare is not actually the main focal point of the production. There's a more important message to be shared than the traditional story. It is a message that brings light to the struggle of thousands of Puerto Rican immigrants that were living in New York City. The 1950s were host to what is known as the Great Migration, in which many Puerto Ricans moved to New York in the hopes of finding better lives. Despite the fact that Puerto Rico had been part of the United States as a territory since the early 1900s, Caucasian Americans were still unfair against them and harbored a lot of hatred. Conflict arose between the two ethnic groups, both through aggression and through the denial of equal opportunities and rights. Puerto Ricans found it harder to obtain jobs, and those that had jobs were not equally treated. Jerome Robbins wanted West Side Story to illuminate hardships Puerto Ricans faced. He also wanted to portray the Hispanic people in a positive light while utilizing the format of Romeo and Juliet to share the relationship between the Hispanics and the Caucasians was a hatred without reason. This was not the only film during this time to address cultural differences. So did the 1962 film To Kill a Mockingbird, where a white lawyer defends a black man on an undeserved rape charge. Both of these films emphasize the time period's social norms and reveal that there is no real reason for their hatred to exist. The movie featured 3 times the usual number of performers. It also needed 2 directors. The sets featured in West Side Story are large and do a great job of capturing the setting of the film and are very detailed. The choices of color are also wisely chosen, with contrast being used to draw attention to certain characters when needed. For example, at the dance, the walls of the room are red, while the dancers are dressed in dark colors. This forms a contrast with Maria's white dress, as she is meant to stand out in the scene when she catches Tony's eye. The choice of color provides a symbolic reference to her character's apparent innocence, both in demeanor and in relation to the situation. With the high quality and the large quantity of the sets, this film was a large budget production, which is unusual for a musical. This genre of production usually lacks in background sets and props. Although during this film you can notice the limitations on filming in a studio, there is a much larger amount of objects in the scenes, including cars, streets, courts, and even the faces of multi-story buildings. The directors of West Side Story wanted to utilize sets as well as the city and skyline of New York. Jerome Robbins makes great use of both close-up and panning shots to both introduce people and set pieces without having the need for these pieces to be located off-set. West Side Story stands out from other musicals. The cast and crew who worked to put this movie together wanted to tell a story that was big and powerful. This film uses race to bring a love story to life. Although West Side Story has been reenacted many times, to everyone who played a role in the making of this film, it will never be forgotten.